What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It, your movie podcast for reboots, sequels, adaptations, and other things that we've done time and time again to see if there's any merit in telling these stories again, or if we're truly just mining IPs for that sweet, sweet money that keeps capitalism a-spinning. As always, I am your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And we are talking about the, I will just say, long-awaited sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, a movie that changed animation 5 years ago and brought us an exciting new Spider-Man and a great take, a refreshing take on the character, and brought us Miles Morales, a character that they've do pretty good within the comics. But I'm telling you, between the video game and these movies, he might be just one of the best superhero characters we've ever had.
Easily, and it's funny when you play the game after playing as Peter Parker. You're like, well, do I have to go back to playing as Peter? Because this whole shocking invisible thing works a lot better.
It's as somebody, Spider-Man's my favorite character. I think I'm ready, willing to be like, yeah, Miles might just be a better character than Peter. If we don't let Peter grow up in some of these stories, it's interesting again watching him do the mentor stuff in the game. But I am like, oh yeah, this is just so much more complex and nuanced, and the multiverse. But Terrence, what did you think of Across the Spider-Verse, which no longer is part one, but is in many ways?
They did the in-game Infinity War. Like, yeah, we just won't call them the same thing, but they're still a part one and a part two of each other. So I loved Into the Spider-Verse, loved it so much. And I was like, well, all right, this will be fun to go back into, but there's no way that they can kind of they're not going to recreate that feeling that I got from Into the Spider-Verse. Again, I was wrong. Admittedly, I loved this film from start to finish. Soundtrack to the animation in each sort of universe having its own animation. I think just starting with the Gwen's world and that animation, I was like, oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, and then we're off to the races because they had like this weird cell shape. It was so gorgeous. It was stunning to look at. And I also think that starting for me, because we had sort of already had a Miles story, and granted, this still is a Miles story, but because there's a part one and part two, it's kind of we'll get a continuation of it. But this particular film is a Gwen story, and she's the one who has a beginning, middle, and end. Where I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, it lifts on a cliffhanger. It's not an end." She actually does. She has a growth. The situation with she and her father is sort of the precipice of what the journey that she goes on and comes back and realizes, like, nope, this is the family that I actually should be with. He'll accept me if I come back to him. I love this movie from top to bottom. It is the one hang up. It doesn't bother me because I'm a Spider-Man fan, but I know the one hang up that a lot of people could have. It is long. And for it to be an animated kids film, kids probably be checking out about after that first hour, like, no, well, I'm out. I am done. Where all the parents are like, keep giving me more. And that's where I was with it.
I think it proves the point that we talked about in the Super Mario episode of these animated kids movies cannot just like reach a wider audience because like they're fun. They can be challenging and the kids will still get it. Like we can make a rich story and a rich world. And I'm with you. This starting with Spider-Gwen was incredible because her style just looked so much like those starting comics from, I think it's like Into the Spider-Verse 3 or 4 was her first appearance before her solo series all those years ago. And it looked just like it. I loved, it was very subtle, but the color and the palette and everything else like changed with the emotion. There's a lot of almost like running paint when they're crying and colors coming together when things start. Opening with the band. I'm sure you saw the note. We'll jump around here. The people couldn't hear very well.
Yeah, apparently some cuts are aren't mixed well.
Well, I guess they have a very specific, like the projection should be at 7.
7, right.
And clearly our AMC Prime in Burbank was set to 11 because our seats were like shaking, even in the trailers. But I thought it was a creative choice to like, she's hitting the drums. And I really thought it was just like, this is the director's, like, she's trying to drown out her own stuff. It did
Mhm.
also kind of confuse me because I couldn't tell if her and Miles had like been on adventures and we were going to cut back because she was like, I left him and he wasn't the only one and did it. And I was like, I can't tell if we're like picking up like in the middle of the movie and now we're going to go back.
Right.
I
Yeah,
get,
it was
but
unclear until she finally went to go see him that like, oh, this is the final scene that we see at the end of that film. This is just the
yeah.
time that they've had apart, and
And
they just
some of it
long,
was
long.
new footage too that we
Yeah,
hadn't seen of them together. So I was like, oh, I can't. I was like, I don't know. Maybe I just need to see it again, but loved it. Loved seeing the band. Loved seeing her dad. I really enjoyed every flashback to her, Peter. Uh,
yeah,
the
getting her origin basically. Yeah,
even just her, like her going in and fighting the Renaissance vulture and her dad pulling the gun on her was
yeah,
some of the most like
heartbreaking.
messed up and heartbreaking stuff we had seen.
And then when she takes her mask off, reveals himself to her. I mean, it's almost like a coming out party. Like she's having her coming out moment. She takes the mask off, and the dad's like, "I'm still got to handcuff you. You're under arrest." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And
Shoots
that's
his gun in the air.
yeah, that's what pushes her to go with this family that she's all in. She's like, "You guys are doing this. You guys are doing this," and so she accepts a lot of the BS that comes with that because she can't go back home. And it's not
Yeah.
until she's sort of pushed to having to go back home because her friend is in pain that it all sort of has to come back together. But that was just like, oh, this is what we're starting this off of. You've hooked me, you sons of bitches.
Yeah, they gave her enough like Spider-Man moments with quips and sarcasms. Well, how's the manhunt for me going and flying in? And you got a really good taste of her personality on her own that
Hmm.
you didn't really get in the first one.
Right.
And then having it as this like this jumping pad into what is a very like it should be more awkwardly paced, but it's not. It works so well because everything's engaging. Because then we just abandon that.
Yeah,
We
she's gone.
do all of this like Miles family drama. We introduce the spot. We go back. They have their whole first act. Then Gwen shows up. We have the like betrayal that Gwen has with them. We get in, and it just kept being like, it feels like we're jumping in and out of 2 or 3
It's like three different
movies.
films that are happening together.
And it works the way almost like a comic book works, where or even like a Lord of the Rings type story works, where we just leave some things and come
Hmm.
back. Meeting Hobby was incredible. Every spider was great. I feel like I could just sit down and be like, and the Spider Punk was amazing. They nailed
Yeah.
everyone's style. We did everyone's like origin, which I don't know how many more times we can play that card. That's probably my one. Like I don't need many more in Spider-Man
Well, I
3.
also do like that it's not always going to happen because 299 tries to go through. He's like, no, I got it. Yeah, you're your hero. Blah 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 blah. Like I like that. Sometimes it doesn't go on that path because you're right. That can be a dated piece, especially since they did the sort of the rule of three. They did it in the first one. You can't do a rule of three plus two more. It gets
I could see one more for Miguel O'Hara's like
if
whatever the
you actually
truth
do it
is going to
right.
be,
Correct.
because
Because we haven't fully delved in. There's a lot more to him that we don't have here, which is fine because there's already a lot on the board.
well, and we just haven't touched on, and they're both so small. And we see it when he first starts telling his story, and he like zooms out, and we see like the vampire fangs,
Right.
and Gwen says, "Oh, he's like a ninja vampire, whatever." And I
But it's just a
just
throwaway for her.
and so at first I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, he's getting all the spiders here to. He's going to end up being the Moreland is his name, I think, the guy who eats spider people in Brian Bendis's Spider-Verse story in
Yes, I believe
the
so.
spider totems and all that jazz." And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
he's going to be connected to that. And this is going to be his, like, I've put you all together. I'm going to wipe you all out.
Hmm.
They're all going to feed now. But I imagine that'll be somewhere in 3. Because
Yeah, because
there's,
he keeps saying that like they don't know what I had to sacrifice to do this. I feel like that's going to be what his reveal is going to be that.
and I couldn't figure out if him talking to Peter B. Parker about canon events and you see that world breaking, was that Miguel O'Hara's world, or is that because Peter had the kid? and that wasn't supposed to happen, and he like brought him because Peter's in that world with him when he's like, right, Peter?
He's already in that world. Yeah, I think that was Miguel's world
Because
falling
then he
because
goes there with
Mayday,
MJ, or he goes somewhere with MJ. I suppose we don't know
right?
where.
Because Mayday was a part, right? True, but Mayday for his timeline was a part that was all sort of written. I mean, look, we're you and I, you're big Spidey fans. I think us always seeing because we always say every Spider-Man has to have the Uncle Ben, or in case of the Tom Holland has the Aunt May moment. Although he had Uncle Ben, we just didn't see it on
I
screen.
think we
Always had
saw it
the
in
Uncle
this
Ben moment.
movie. Was it not in this? Is there not a
It
third
did seem
live
like in the
action?
shot. There's a shot of a live action that I think that's the live
I
action of
think that's
our.
Tom
Yeah,
Holland's Uncle Ben.
I agree. I think so too. It's just we never saw, but I think that was the precipice of it. But what we also never really thought about is that yeah, in addition to that, there's always the captain Stacy, whoever the captain is, also is a part of that too. And I was like, that's cool. And just to know that no matter what version of this you have some variation of that. And it's just so smart writing to be like, oh, my dad was becoming as soon as they said it, I was like, oh crap, his father is becoming getting seated as captain. It's like, oh, this is about to turn real fast.
Well,
It's just genius. It's so smart as a writing duo for Lord Miller.
and Gwen has her moment of, Gwen Stacy usually falls for Spider-Man. It doesn't work out.
That broke my heart. So I was sitting there. I was like, you son of a gun. He's like putting his hand closer to her. He's like, oh yeah, we're about to get it on. He's like, but it never works out. And he's like pulls his hand away. And then he's like, well,
It's
go ahead.
I'm curious then, and I'm like, we can sit here and do multiverse stuff, or we can keep talking about this movie, but I am curious how many other Spider-Gwens and Mileses there are.
That's the one thing that we haven't really seen. Like there's a bunch of different versions of Peter Parker, and a bunch of Gwen Stacy's, because she sort of alluded to if there's a bunch of Gwen Stacy's in the world, it never ends well for that Gwen Stacy. Like it's always something terrible that happens. But we only have one Miles. Like we have not seen any other multiverse that has another Miles until the end. But that was the first time that we had actually seen, but none of the other Miles are spider people. They're the other Miles clearly is a villain, if you will.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because I wonder how much Rick and Morty is going to, because like all this multiverse stuff predates Rick and Morty, but there is a reveal in their multiverse story of like, oh, all he's actually done is taken the multiverses where he's the smartest person in the world, and he's closed off the multiverse, everything else. Because there also aren't Avengers and all these characters that they don't have the rights to.
Right.
It would be an easy workaround for Miguel O'Hara to be like, I've isolated the spider people that don't have anyone else. That's why this world. Earth 42 New York doesn't have anything. Because I was like, oh, we get to this world where there's no like, because the spider didn't bite Peter. There's no one like, but Peter also only does New York.
Right. And it gets a little dicey because we know we're seeing live action Spider-Man, where we know that one of those live action Spider-Man has a ton of other heroes that are present.
And he mentions Doctor Strange and Earth 10999999. So I'm like, okay, so there are.
And we have the big Glover reveal.
Oh my God. Was that all of these live action moments? I was like, is the end of Spider-Verse 3 going to just like start a live action? Right. Like we're just going to we're not going to restart the Miles Morales story. We're just going to like zap these actors into live action.
I think it's really smart because I probably would have felt differently about that Glover one had they not given me the convenience store one with the Venom piece.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, you've already set up that now we can enter into live action world and vice versa. So I was like, all right, cool, that's start. So when I saw that at the end, I'm like, all right, cool. Then all bets are off. We can do whatever the hell we want.
I thought Earth 42 was going to be the Venom world because there isn't a Spider-Man
no Spidey there. Actually,
that we know of.
Right.
That because now I'm like, well, now there has to be one there. We went to that world. There has someone Spider-Manning in that universe.
There. Yeah.
There's clearly some things that they're like
holding,
talking to Marvel and holding, and
yeah.
I was waiting for some stupid Kang reveal. I was like, where's he? Is all going to be because like even the branch he shows like looks like the Loki branch, and I was like, ooh, they're doing a lot of work to have all this work out.
Yeah,
this is all going to be great. Maybe.
but it is a gorgeous. I think that's when this was all said and done. I was like, this is a gorgeous movie. Each and it can be jarring if you let it be, but it's each one of these worlds has a completely different aesthetic. Our Indian world versus the actual Spider Society world. Like the Indian world is fun. Spider Society looks completely different, but like it all feels like yes, this is all still about the same story, but it's a delight to watch. There are moments where my mouth was just dropped. The whole turnover scene where they're just hanging out and just talking, I was like, oh, this is. There were legit moments that I had to pitch myself. Like I know this is a cartoon, but this is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen in my entire life.
Every frame of painting, like I just
Yeah.
kept being like, well, old man Kubrick was right. This is something else. This is
Yeah.
because it is almost overwhelming. There were moments where I was, especially with Spider-Punk, where I was like, okay, we're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like, you kind of ease into it, and it's never overwhelming, but it is always a little bit of like, well, I want to see what's going on here. And I want to see like, I want to pause and play Where's
Then I want to
Waldo
be like,
with
which Spider-Man is that? What's over there? What's over there? I'm like, I'm seeing like there's so much happening on the screen, and I know I'm not taking it all in, but I wish I could. Can we freeze the film, please?
and just the speed in the Spider Society of, I mean, the Ben Reilly one's easy because we let that Andy Samberg one do more, but the boring Rhino and the 1960s Doc Ock and the live action cameos and all this different stuff. And I was like, and the video game characters and video game, the PlayStation
Spider-Man
1 video game. And I was like, oh my God, I really wanted a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 Spider-Man rolling around somewhere, but yeah, that giant cyborg looking one that I guess is one of the action figures out, but it's very expensive. And I was like, well, we're not going to spend $80 on a figure that barely was in this movie, guys. Like, it's very cool, but curious to know why Noir and Ham aren't there. I was really hoping, because we see them at the end.
They're part of whatever Gwen's team is assembling, yeah.
And I was waiting for her to go into Noir's world and him be like, so you finally gave up on him, huh? I could have told you from day one on some, like, not Ozymandias, but the other Watchmen character with the Matt Rorschach. I was waiting for him to be on some Rorschach, like, I could have told you can't trust those. I was waiting for him to be like on top of it.
I think it's because I feel like we do so much in this film and we go to so many worlds. It's almost impossible to like, all right, cool. Now we got to reintroduce. I think because they've already been established, like we're just going to put them on the board. You know who they are. We're going to bring them back in the next one. But Hammond and Noir are here. So I think it just would have been a lot to sort of put them in there.
It would have, yeah. I was just glad to see them and be like, great,
yeah.
Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man, they're coming back.
He's the MacGuffin, and we got to go get him out.
I love the team that's sort of assembled. Like I love that we've sort of established that Hobby is this very much anti-establishment. The guy's like, oh
yeah,
even when
I quit.
Like, nope, I'm out. And deuces. And you have a lot of people, even in the Spider Society, who don't completely buy into it. Like you have everybody who's kind of like, nope, this is how it has to be. This is how it has to be. But you have like Spider Bite, kind of like, well, I might just let him go. I'm gonna let this one. I'm not gonna push this button yet. And it's cool to show that even in this big system, there's always going to be at least one or two who still have that heartbeat of Spider-Man. Like, but maybe if we don't do it the way that maybe what happens then?
Oh yeah, there's so much to still do because like one of the canon events was even Venom, and I was like, "Ooh, there's got to be a symbiote somewhere in this stupid society." Like, what? Come on now. Yeah, top to bottom, it was great, and I love, it's interesting thematically and why it's like, well, why are we redoing and why are we here? This one I feel like is very easy. I feel like the first big one is just innovation and animation is needed all the time.
Yeah.
And this is a great excuse to not only show off that something different can work, but to show off that hundreds of different things can work.
Correct.
We talk about like diversity and inclusion a lot and just how often that can be relevant.
Yeah.
But even, we've seen conversations already of if Gwen is transcoded and the colors of the flag and her there's the protect trans kids signs in her universe where like the Black Lives Matter signs were in Miles. And I was like, what a cool way of sprinkling in all of these social causes that I would assume are relevant in every universe, but are highlighted.
Correct. Correct.
Actually, in Spider-Gwen's world, there is no racism.
There is no racism there.
For a very, very white world to not have racism. Yeah, I like that we're playing with that.
Essentially, her story, like I said, is it's like a coming out story. That's essentially what that feels like. But yeah, I think obviously the diversity of having a black and brown lead and then a female lead in this both are something that any of the Spider films have all been straight white dude. So this just sort of kind of adds to that. I love that there are moments where they just straight up speak in Spanish and like, cool, we're not gonna
hold your hand.
You. No, screw it. You'll figure it out in context. We're gonna keep going.
They're mad. His mom is upset.
She is very pissed.
Yeah, and a lot of like evergreen themes that I think are more relevant like now with you know, everyone's telling me what to do and I'm going to do my own thing. And like, well, these are the things that have to happen. I feel like that very much echoes what our generation and the younger generations especially go through of just like, well, there was this set path of what I'm going to do, whether it's school and then a degree and then a job and then I do all the white picket house things. And it is just like, no, you don't have to do all of this.
Yeah.
There is no box for Spider-Man. If the first one was like anyone can be under the mask, the second movie is the story can be anything. It doesn't need to be in these boxes.
Yeah, you don't always have to do things the way that it's always been said for us to do. I think, and what you do, what happens for you may not be what is good for another person. I think one of the biggest pieces for me that also hit is how Gwen tells her father, and it goes horribly wrong. And she comes back to Miles, and Miles is like, maybe I should just tell him. And she's like, no, absolutely, under no circumstances should you do that. And then he finally gets the wherewithal to just like, you know what, Mom? Screw it. Here it is. I'm Spider-Man. Now, granted, she has no clue what the hell that means, but for him, that's a big moment because my friend told me that I should absolutely not do this under any circumstances. But now I don't want to lose my father. I don't want to lose this. I'm Spider-Man. And that's a big weight for him.
And they do a lot of work to get him to that moment because you get like the first small betrayal is Gwen's here to spy on you.
Right.
And then like the second betrayal is Peter B. Parker and her having talked about this.
Right.
And all like they do enough work of like, and you knew, and you knew, and you knew, and you knew. And when she webs down to ketchup and he just rips it off, I was like, oh, well, of course now he's going to go back and tell his parents.
Right.
Because it's a great opening sequence with his mom of people are going to tell you don't belong and you belong in these places. And for him to come back and be like, and I did what you said, Mom, and I showed them that I belong here, but they don't care. And again, wrong mom.
Wrong mom.
Real glad that we're labeling the universes in this movie. I really need the MCU to start doing it.
Everyone else did, yes.
Clearly they just can't figure it out because of like I assume all the like Sony and MCU like have their rules, but I really just need Loki season 2 to start being like Earth. Brrr.
Right.
I don't know who's devying those out. I don't know how everyone knows where they are.
Like this one, even for the first one for Gwen, they're just like, this is Gwen's world. That's all you need to know.
Well, like, even like there must be something more to the story because I'm pretty sure the spider that shows up to bite Miles has 42 on it.
Correct.
Yeah. Which like it's not like the Sam Raimi one had 852 on it. So I don't buy that Spot just zapped one out during an experiment.
Yeah.
Like there's
something more to that.
Even if it is just as simple as Miguel's doing what Kingpin was trying to do.
Right.
Or he is this vampire ninja creature. I feel like there's going to be some big altering the whole story thing.
Like everything changed. Like, oh my God, he's far worse than he is. Because right now we're sitting with 2 villains, but
kind of 3.
True, but Miguel doesn't feel truly like a villain yet. I think it's going because he feels like, oh, I'm doing this to save the Spider-Man society. Whereas I think it's going to come out like, no, this dude's a terrible person. And then some of those other folks are going to start turning like, wait a minute, we got behind the wrong horse here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that moment has to come. The society has to
Yeah.
Where's Madam Web?
Yeah.
There's somebody who should be in charge of this, and she's not there. I feel like that's got to be around the corner.
Yeah.
Or like the origin for her, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Especially
like
since
there's
a live film coming for that, so they're definitely going to put that in play somehow.
I've also seen a lot of people point out that if you like watch the post-credit scene of Spider-Verse, that Miguel O'Hara's design is more Spidey, and this guy, like, he looks like a pizza slice.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he got ripped to like go fight Miles, to go fight this 15-year-old boy, or if we're also going to find out like this Miguel O'Hara, that Miguel, there's two different.
Right.
It's going to get very complicated.
And now we have 2 Miles on the board, and I already love just the way that Shamik is. The voice inflection is already different because one, you're a 15-year-old boy, and this one you're like, you're a grown man. Like, yo, what the hell are you? Like,
he pronounces Morales different. I noticed too. It's a little more because his dad is dead. It's a little more Spanish speak. It's interesting. Loved. I thought that was intentional. Like his plan was to go to Earth 42. Because to me, that was the logical thing to do, was to be like, jump in this thing and go figure out.
Because I caught him saying that you go back to wherever your genetic code is. So immediately when he said that, I'm like, oh, he's getting sucked back up. I was a bit ahead of that on that, but it still worked. Like it didn't stop the story for me.
I don't think I was ahead of, like, I picked up on those cues too, but I just genuinely was like, well, if it was me, I would be going to Earth 42.
I'm going to the one. Yeah.
That's where the answers are.
Right. Like I'll find more information there. Yeah.
So then when he did the whole monologue and I was like, like everyone in the theater reactor was like, no, right. He's in,
right.
This was the plan.
Yeah.
Oh, it was not the plan. Very curious how they're going to play that world. Cause I know that Sony is in a box, but a part of me is like, at least like Venom should be, like there should be.
You can play with that. Like you have that. You have
in theory, if there were enough people becoming villains, somebody like Mysterio would have stepped up. Like I feel like normally when we see these universes without heroes, is like
Craven or somebody would have taken over.
Norman Osborn has actually been the Green Goblin, and is the paradigm.
And the Osborn spider is the reason Miles is even bit. So like that could still be a part of this. Like you could be like, there's Norman Osborn here. Oh, that would be great.
I would love. We haven't gotten any Osborns.
No, there's no Osborns in this world.
That's also, I'm like, oh man, that would be. Just get Willem Dafoe back. He's talking to this Norman, and then ours comes in.
Yeah,
you can make these movies forever,
all day, and I'll take it. Just put them in my veins.
My stupid. Do you have any like? I really hope we get this. I have such a stupid one that's not gonna happen because it would break everything. I really want him to talk to. I don't even know how you would code it, but like the comic book Peter Parker. I want a conversation where he's like, "Oh no, kid. I was the first one. Let me lay this down for you. That guy's a villain. I've done this before. I'm like, my Miles is already older than you.
Right.
Like, we did an incursion. The Ultimate Universe came in here. Don't trust a Spider-Man that doesn't have Avengers. Just don't.
Right.
Unless it's these 3 people, these 2 guys.
These 2. Right.
I really want some, like I was waiting for somebody in the Spider side to be like, hey, Miles, come here. This guy's saying he was the first. And to be like, no, I was in the 60s.
Yeah.
And there's always, if DC's multiverse has taught us anything, there's always a prime.
Yeah.
So I would love some stupid thing with that. Like, I don't know, my Miguel O'Hara's dope. He was from 2099. He time traveled back here. Yours is
great.
That guy's. I wouldn't trust.
I don't trust him.
Really want a superior Spider-Man. Was really hoping for a Doc Ock in the body.
Oh yeah, that would be.
That's my like. Come on, 3.
Yeah.
Tease me. Get Alfred Molina to voice it. Right, I would lose my mind.
No, that would be great.
Yeah, no, there's still so much they can mine in this, and they keep finding ways to keep it relevant and fresh and not encumbersome. Like we're doing such a good job, and I feel like it, to me at least, started in like Civil War, where we have a lot of people, but it's this person's story, and we're
Right.
going to do this and this and this and this and this.
Even though we add all these people, this still feels like a Miles, and for this one, a Gwen. Like this is still the two of their stories, and nobody else. However many people we throw in there, and this one for the most part, they take our Peter Parker from the previous one, Peter B. Parker, and kind of he's like a fourth tier character. He's not even really in this. It's Gwen and Miles. Those are the people that we care about in this.
Yeah. Well, there's not too much for Peter B. Parker to do in this
arc,
movie.
right.
Yeah.
And Mayday is there. So you can see he's kind of in a happy place at this point.
I do want more of Jess. I want more motorcycle webs coming out of the fingertips.
I love her, and
yeah,
you know, she's fantastic. We didn't mention it, but I need to. Metro Boomin music.
Oh my god,
is ridiculous.
I can't stop.
I've been listening to that soundtrack left and right, and just even the openings part with Gwen stuff and self love. I was like, oh, this is the music that's playing through this whole. I'm in it, and from this point on, that and the title credit song, I had to go to the car immediately and start playing it. Metro Boomin knew the assignment and he nailed it.
I would argue, I'm just going to say it, better soundtrack than the Guardians movies.
I agree.
I would say between the first movie and this one.
Just repurposing music. This one's like you coming up with all new stuff and it all fits. There are moments when I listen to this soundtrack, I immediately go back to the scene that it existed in the movie, and I was like, "That's a hard feat to do." Because like you recreated the feeling just by hearing that song again. Well done.
It reminds me a lot of Kendrick's Black Panther album when he just did the whole
He's
thing
doing from the top to bottom.
Yeah. It's all just fantastic.
Yeah,
I love it all so much. That is so much money.
All the money.
So much money. So much money.
Yeah,
I don't even know the actual number right now, but just
it's already at 208 million.
Great.
It's
great.
Worldwide, which is pretty. The reason why that's even more impressive, unlike Mario, who had a pretty big number, this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So for you to have a box office like that with a 2 hour and 20 minute long, they're loving it.
It's going to be interesting to see if it beats Rise of the Beasts next week.
It will.
It probably will. But that is our show, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. You can, of course, leave us a review or comment on our YouTube channel's comment. Hollywood Already Did It, which also has all of our trailer reactions and Terrence's reviews for TV shows and everything else. And our Twitter is Hollywood ADI, as well as our TikTok. I'm at, as always, Blake. Terrence is at Terrence Tatum, and we will see everybody next time.